I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is Trilloquy, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. Scott, we got some big news to share at the end of this opus, but
Exciting.
we'll just leave it at that for now. So be sure to stick around all the way to the end of this opus of Trilloquy. Before we get started, Scott, last week I didn't really have a chance to congratulate you and thank you for this new reggae inspired theme. I mean, obviously we chose it to go along with the 420 opus last week. But what was sort of your process in putting that together?
I was learning new software at the same time.
Hmm.
So there were plenty of evenings where I was sat down here for 4 or 5 hours, hunched over my keyboard, learning the new software to be able to record all that.
Hmm.
And you sent a couple tracks. I think you sent an Ariana Grande track and something else as just sort of an inspiration.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
The
I
uh,
can
the
I can tell you too, they call that feel that reggae has, they call that the bubble, when you get on
oh,
and you're
okay.
and you're you're sort of riding that scoot
Yeah.
feel that it's got. That's hard.
And I'll shout out John Del Vento, who was featured in the 420 opus of Trilloquy. You know, some of the things he was talking about was Ableton, which is what you use, being a part of music education and a part
Right?
of the way that we learn how to put all this stuff together. I mean, Scott, what if I guess Ableton wasn't invented when you were in school, but but what if that, or what if you could be a part in teaching youngsters how to use that, and giving them a leg up on whatever they wanted to do musically or otherwise.
I would love that because I've been missing teaching. I taught as an adjunct for 4 years,
Yeah.
and I was teaching kids how to use the kids. These young students, these young adults, I was teaching them how to use Pro Tools, but I taught them how to edit on tape first.
Wow. And I couldn't begin to. I know nothing about hardly playing a tape, much less editing on one.
So, yeah, so then they get a respect and an appreciation for it, but I miss that teaching component, and, we talked about, putting together maybe some sort of a camp for the Jennings School,
Yeah.
that is on a previous opus. I forget which one, it's in the early days, like number
um
12 or something, but, yeah, something like that would be just really rewarding, I think.
And speaking of, teaching kids and camps, today's guest, his name is Am're Ford. He lives down in Oklahoma. We connected at the past Sphinx conference back in February 2020. You know, Scott, when we were allowed to be socially,
Close.
together and all of that sort of thing. And he told me about a project he was putting together, a camp for this summer for kids to sort of give them a leg up on music education and becoming instrumentalists. Now, of course, we recorded just at the beginning. My conversation with Amari took place just at the beginning of this health crisis. So now, he's realized that he's had to cancel the camp, but his website is still up, and I decided that we should go ahead and still air this opus of Trilloquy because his journey and his perspective on music education could really. Be really beneficial for folks to be thinking about as we consider what it's going to look like when schools open back up and the way we need to shift music education. Again, as we were talking with John Del Vento last week.
I was gonna say there's a little synergy there because John was talking about upgrading the way that kids are initiated into music courses of study. Let's modernize this by playing something that they recognize rather than Frere Jacques or whatever.
Absolutely, and it's a conversation that's happening everywhere. As we tape this, Scott, later this week, I'm actually going to be joining Katie and Delaney on the Classically Black podcast, and something that they're doing that we're going to explore in that episode of their podcast is just that, tying in rap music, tying in hip hop with classical as a means of education. So I'm still toying with which two rap tunes I'm going to bring in. They asked me to bring two because there are connections to be made everywhere. These days, earlier today, I was listening to a lot of Naughty by Nature,
I was
and
gonna
even
say,
and even if you go to their biggest hits, O.P.P. There's piano throughout that, and I can't wait to get in front of my keyboard and explore that a little bit more. Really important to recognize that those sounds are in hip hop.
Um, I really think that Steely Dan got sort of a boost from some of the sampling that has happened of some of their tracks.
Oh yeah, which yeah, you know better than I do which
We
tune
always
of
do.
theirs that was sampled.
Black Cow, Black Cow. That's it.
In the corner of my eye, I saw you in Rudy's. You were very high. New York to the heart, but got love for all. Line die in the fire where I learned the ball. Uptown is the place where I lay my dome. On the streets of the Bronx where my family roam. Oh damn it, we home. Peter got a 9mm. Player haters can feel the flame from my heater. I never really liked to play a fool like that, but I love to succeed. See foes fall flat.
And, then there's a whole other leg of study to add in there, legal, so that if you are sampling somebody else's work,
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sure you're in the clear.
Yeah, a whole nother league of study there, the music business. I actually took a legal class in undergrad, a music business class. But one tune that I know I'm going to bring into Katie and Delaney, and that I wanted to kind of bring up a little bit today as we're getting to this conversation with Amari, is a tune called "Emotionless" by Drake. So the way in which I'm going to frame this on Classically Black, and just to preview it here, is the idea that it's based on it samples a tune called "Emotions" by Mariah Carey, and that is sort of reminiscent of the gospel and spiritual tradition, and
Mhm.
how that is just as much classical as anything else. So how this study relating hip hop and other genres to music education, just broadens everything up intrinsically. And the next level of this music is that it comes with all of these really poetic words. And I know, Scott, you pride yourself in your writing, and when I read the lyrics to this tune, I just can't help but to feel something. How Drake talks about leaving me in limbo to question what I believe, leaving me to ask what's their motive in making peace.
Leaving me to not trust anybody I meet. Leaving me to ask, is there anybody like me?
I have to tell you, I gotta read the lyrics anyway, because my hearing is so bad. Everything just goes past me in a lot of these rap songs.
But not that one by Drake. If you listen, I think he's being pretty I think he's being pretty clear there.
Mm.
But so so as we transition into our conversation with Amari Ford, he actually brings up a rap tune as well. There's a rapper out there, his name is J. Cole, and one of his recent hits was a tune called Middle Child. And in it you can hear the sort of reminiscences of the black marching band, and the way those horns sound. And in this opus, you'll hear how he used that song as a way of engaging his students, something they wanted to do. So I thought we might listen to just a little bit of that as we transition into my conversation with Mr. Amari Ford. Amari Ford, such a pleasure to have you here on Trilloquy. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
You have such a beautifully unique name. I love the name Amari. Where does that name come from?
It's actually my mother's name spelled backwards. So my name is A-apostrophe-R-E. Her name is Irma, E-R-M-A. My mom had a pretty difficult pregnancy, and so she wasn't sure that she would live beyond the pregnancy, but wanted something that I could remember her by. So she gave me her name.
Oh my goodness. And your mother is still living, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure the two of you have such a close relationship. I mean, you're closely related in name, I'm sure, personally as well.
We're working on it. We're really alike.
Okay.
sometimes.
Yep.
We're too much alike, and then we just have to kind of have some space. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, she's cool.
I wonder if your mom is a musician at all. Did she play a role in your introduction to music?
Sort of like, so my grandfather was a pastor,
Amen.
and had 13 kids. And, when you're a pastor, you got to have somebody to sing before you preach. And
Okay.
so the kids would sing.
Oh, okay.
So they had like a whole group and wrote songs and all of that stuff. So
It's interesting how the story for so many black folk, no matter what corner of music we go into, how the origins are there in church. Do you see that being sustained in your experience? Are 7, 8-year-olds, 4 or 5-year-olds, for that matter, being introduced to music through the church, based on the kids that you come into contact with?
um I don't think in the same way,
Mm-hmm.
because like people my age who have kids aren't going, either they're not going to church, or if they are, they're not always going to traditional black churches
Mm-hmm.
and getting like that black church experience, which that is like a whole nother conversation
Right,
about,
right.
yeah, relevancy and yeah, a whole bunch of other stuff. But so the short answer is no. I don't I don't really see it as much.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some of the kids that you do teach and the summer camp initiative that you have going. Excited to talk about that, but I kind of just wanted to check in as far as your personal situation. So as we're taping this, we're kind of in the heat of this COVID-19, this corona virus crisis with lockdowns and everything. How has this impacted you personally?
Yeah, I'm still like sort of working through it. I deal with anxiety, and so for the most part, I've been able to like block it out. But Thursday, just like a couple days ago, my school, we were going on a trip to Chicago. I was going to chaperone with the high school, and that trip got canceled. Then there were just all of these cancellations, and so it really started to hit me like, okay, this is a real thing. Um, needed to kind of deal with it.
Is school in session for you still, or has school been canceled as of yet?
So yeah, the State Board of Education met yesterday and canceled school for all Oklahoma schools through April 5th, I think. So nobody is having school, and there's like no expectation of doing like online teaching or anything like that. Um,
I
and
want,
they've suspended like all activities, concerts, all sorts of things that might involve students.
and I'm sure you had, a music teacher has plenty to do at all times. I'm sure there were concerts you were prepping for, and all sorts of things.
Yeah, like we just finished contest a couple weeks ago,
Okay.
so we were sort of in a slow period, but we were supposed to have a chamber music festival on April 4th.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, that's out.
Well, how did the kids do at contests, by the way?
My kids, they did well. We got 2s on stage and then 1 in sight reading.
Okay, and of course, for folks who don't know, most music contests around the country are rated from 1 to 5, with 1 being the best, and 5 being the not so best. So yeah, a 2 is an excellent rating, I think is the word. So congratulations
Yeah,
on those excellent ratings.
thank you.
And then, and I imagine that yourself, you have performance things, professional things that were on the horizon for you that have maybe been canceled or postponed at this point.
Yeah, I play in a community orchestra, and we were going to do Mozart's Requiem in April, but like the school that we rehearsed at is closed. So we just got an email yesterday to say that they've moved that to the fall.
And that's kind of morose in itself, Mozart's Requiem and the story behind, that, him doing as much of that as he could on his deathbed, and what's going on now is kind of it's kind of eerie.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get more specifically into you. So one of the big things that I've been exploring lately is the fact that music education, the pathways are a little rigid. So even at the best of, I shouldn't say the best, but even at the most notable of music institutions and conservatories, folks will graduate and not really know or have a way toward that next step. Did you find that to be the case for you after you graduated from music school?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So
Remind me
in
where you went to school
undergrad,
first. Sorry.
yeah, I went to the University of Central Oklahoma
Mm.
for my undergraduate degree. Started out as music ed, but like at the last second, I had to switch to performance. I failed this class, and not because I didn't know the work. It was just that this professor would assign so much reading, and then I get to class, and she wasn't talking about it. So I just, in my 20s, said, I'm not doing this no more. And then I was like 2 points away from passing the class. And I could have come back to take the class, but all I had was that class and then student teaching. So it'd be like 2 extra semesters.
Right, right.
So I switched to performance, put together a senior recital, and then went to UNC Greensboro to get a master's degree in composition. Then, yeah, like once I graduated with my master's, I was looking for work, trying to like teach in the school district or just anywhere. But I couldn't find like any sort of job. I was applying to be like a administrative assistant, teacher's assistant, substitute, all of the things. It was just very difficult. So I ended up coming back to Oklahoma.
What is your response to folks who may, have said to you, well, you just should have worked a little bit harder in that music education class back in your undergrad? What would have made the difference for you in that situation specifically?
I think that like if I had done a little bit more work, yeah, I would have passed the class and graduated earlier. But also, I think that the experiences that I had past that class were so valuable to me. Like if I had gotten that music education degree, there's a good chance that I would have started teaching right away instead of going to graduate school for composition.
Yeah, and I was actually going
Um,
to ask about that. Like, it's funny how things just happen so serendipitously. It
yeah.
it doesn't sound like you regret or would change the way things sort of panned out. But how did getting that degree in performance, getting a master's in composition, and then going back into music education anyway impact the way you execute that job of teaching kids?
And that's the thing, like, although I wasn't teaching in the classroom, I was still like teaching and working with kids. I ran a summer program, both in Oklahoma City and in Greensboro, and an after school program in Greensboro. And I was like still teaching, just not in a classroom.
Hmm.
And so I think that like coming back to sort of finish and get like certified completely, I felt like I had the experience that I needed. Like I missed out on student teaching, but like I still had like real life experiences. Um,
And people will say that, student teaching is that real life experience. But, my challenge, similar to you, I started music education. I went 4 years through it. And at the end of my fourth year, decided to switch over to performance, not necessarily because I failed a class, but I just never wanted to deal with middle schoolers. So that, that
yeah,
was, that was my thing. Um,
right,
but, student teaching, for me was a really hard thing to tackle because, it's basically working a full-time job for free.
right. Yeah, and I know a lot of people talk about just like the impact that that has on them, like trying to work a full time job, but then those of us who actually need to work to live while we're in school and trying to juggle those things can be difficult. So I guess I'm lucky in the fact that like my real world experience or my field experience like paid me while I was doing it.
How would you, if it were up to you, how would you change that pathway specifically, from music education classroom to practicum to job? How would you shape that transition for future music teachers in a more effective way? Because again, it's hard to do the full-time work of that practicum of doing that student teaching while taking care of yourself at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. because obviously, like, the practicum is really important, but
Mhm.
and you, I think if you shorten the day, then there's like things that you miss while you're in the practicum that you should get. I don't know, maybe there could be like some exploration of certain days that you're doing the practicum so that you can work if you need to,
Mhm.
or even, that colleges can come up with like a scholarship that can give you a stipend while you're doing the practicum.
And yeah, money is always the challenge, as we'll get to with your summer camp.
Right.
Take me to the first day you got in front of that classroom. So you have a performance degree, you have your composition degree, you've gone through your certifications and all those sort of things. What were some of your immediate challenges? I know, as we've said, money is always a challenge, but did you find in classroom challenges as you transition into your role as a teacher?
Yeah. So my very first job was doing a long-term sub at a private Catholic school.
Mm.
And so that was actually like really easy. My real first day with that, I would say, was when I taught orchestra and band that fall. I taught at a Title I school, and yeah, I had all of these plans, and then the kids showed up, and I quickly realized that as a school, we didn't have the stuff in place to like really help the kids be structured, and to support the teachers in the classroom. So,
And for people
like,
who don't know, what is a Title I school?
yeah, Title I school is a school that is comprised of students that there's a percentage of them that are on free and reduced lunch, but at our school, I think it was like 99%. So their Title I school is going to be like low SES or low socioeconomic status. Yeah,
Yeah, it always boils down to money. I mean, what are some of
yeah,
the? I'm wondering what are some of the real life in school in classroom challenges attached to money. I mean, and especially as it compares to your being a sub at that Catholic school. I mean, did you
right.
just not have access to instruments, to music? What was the story?
Yeah, at my school also is a pretty small school, so there weren't a lot of options for kids to do things. So I ended up having really large classes, but also not enough instruments for all of the kids to learn. And so we were doing like this share thing where, there's an eighth grader who plays trumpet and they can take it home, but like the seventh and sixth grader who also use that same trumpet don't get to take the instrument home because we don't have enough.
What what
Um,
what is the value of music education, for these kids? Because I imagine, if the kids are sharing an instrument, they come from families who can't necessarily get them an instrument of their own.
right.
What is the value of music education, for these folks just trying to put food on the table at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think that like in that particular community, there is some value because of like the rich history that both that middle school and the high school connected have. Just as of late, there hasn't been a lot of stability in those schools with those programs. And so, like, there's definitely value in the community, but not necessarily with the students because, like, the current students, because it's not something that they've seen a whole lot of.
Mm.
And then also, they what they have seen is marching band. And so when I'm like, hey, let's learn to read these notes, it's like, well, we don't want that, Mr. Ford. We want to put on these uniforms and like march in this parade.
So how
Um,
do you deal with that? Because they would very much be engaged by that, black marching band experience that I think you're
yeah.
describing. But it sounds like you have a different idea for them.
Well, I think that in general, like music educators do a disservice to say, oh, only this style of music is valid.
Mm.
And I mean, I didn't do a super great job last year, but I did, like, we did march in a parade. And I like wrote out some stuff for them to play. Some of them learned to read, and then some of them like learned it by ear. They wrote in the notes. And I mean, I wanted them to learn in the way that they could learn. And I think that had I been there for longer, I definitely would have had some time to kind of work through some of those kinks. But see, I just tried to balance and make learning engaging for them or fun for them, and then try to get them to learn like we did Middle Child by J. Cole.
Okay.
I knew that was a song that they really liked, so let me write these notes. And then, that was sort of a motivation for them to learn to read because we can play Middle Child.
Yeah, Middle Child by J. Cole. And of course, when it comes to, music education and classical music, the tradition has been looking down on hip hop and hip hop artists. But obviously that was a way for you to really reach these kids and to engage them through music education.
Right. And, I've just music education should be relevant. We don't have to learn about people that are old, white and dead.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they wrote some good music, but like there are people who are alive who are making music that is also good.
Yeah, yeah.
And even at the school that I teach at now, which the demographic is like almost completely flipped, I challenged them. So we had like a music calendar, and every morning they came in, I would play a song from like a different genre of music. And like on Fridays, we did HBCU bands because it was the fall and marching band season.
So you're not at this Title I school anymore.
Yeah, I'm at a different school now.
Oh, okay. So what are the differences between that school and the school that you work at now, as far as these things we're talking about, the challenges, the issues?
Yeah, so I switched districts. And so the district that I teach in now is much more affluent, a lot more white. But like the things with instruments, well, I have a number of cellos and basses. I have so many that we can send instruments home with students who can't afford to rent one. So they can take a school instrument home, keep it there in practice, and then also have an instrument that they play at school.
Was it hard for you to leave the kids behind at that Title I school? Because, with limited resources comes, limited human resources, limited professionals to really engage these kids in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, it was difficult because in a way I felt like I was leaving and betraying my people. And so, yeah, it was difficult, but like that environment, not necessarily the kids, but like there were adults on like a varying degree of levels that also contributed a whole lot more to this decision.
So maybe,
Like,
I won't ask you to throw anyone under the bus specifically, but colleagues or more parents.
I'm talking colleagues, I'm talking about administration, and not like school administration, but like district administration.
Oh my goodness.
So this is like with that particular school district, an issue that they are starting to work through. It's going to take a while to kind of get rid of old systems, put in some new systems, and get that thing to work. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's
overall, that it just wasn't good for me personally. So I had to do it.
And that's a conversation that I don't feel like folks really dive into often enough. We talk about parental support, community support of music programs, but that collegial, if that's a word, that collegial support of music programs is something that gets overlooked. If you could talk to the non-music teachers, the school administrators, folks working at the boards of education, what would you tell them as far as really being that support system for those music educators?
Whew. I mean, yeah, we can only perform so many miracles. And in this case, like the support looks like money. It looks like funding, and you at least pretending like you want to have like these options for our students, but also realizing the value that music and the arts bring to students. there are all of these studies that talk about what music and the arts do to the brain. And recently, Texas Music Educators Association has put out like some numbers about how their students score on the SAT, like students who make all state in comparison to like the state and the national average.
Hmm.
And it's significantly higher. Like people who made all state score significantly higher on that test. And
Yeah, and
so,
yet driving that point is so important. It's one thing to learn how to play the clarinet phenomenally, but there are reverberating effects and impacts of that music education that more people, should and would care about.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of focus on like when people think about being in an orchestra, like, well, I don't want to be a professional clarinet player. And like everyone's not going to be. And that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
But the skills that you learn and like the development that happens, like those skills are transferable.
So, despite all of these challenges and how hard you work throughout the school year, that's not quite enough for you. You like to teach in the summer as well. How about you talk to me a little bit about the process of developing this summer music camp that you're currently in charge of?
Yeah, so when I couldn't find work in North Carolina, someone from Oklahoma City reached out to me and said, "Hey, like this school needs a band director. Would you be interested in like taking that position?" And so it made me think about how in this school district, which is the one that I worked in when I first got back, particularly in we serve a lot of Title I students, low SES. And this school was on the east side of town, which is where like all of the black people live, or
Hmm.
a lot of black people live. And I thought about the elementary schools and the middle schools and even the high schools and the lack of stability in their programs. And it's like they have to keep starting over. And then the ones who stay, they still are dealing with the challenges of not having enough resources and not having enough support and just like the difficulty that they're working through. But the school district isn't a whole lot of help. And so I started thinking of what I could do to combat that was outside of the system of like the school district. So I wouldn't have to like, deal with those issues. Um, and so I decided like, oh, I should create like a summer camp, arts in action. And so yeah, that's how I arrived at creating arts in action. And right now it's a summer camp, but ideally when it's fully fleshed out, it'll be a program that runs the entire school year and the summer.
Now, this summer won't be the first summer of Arts in Action, right?
Right.
How have summer camps in the past gone?
The first camp we had in 2018, we had like 7 students, and we had a couple instrumentalists, a couple vocalists, and a pianist, and it was like a really cool experience for them and for me, just to be able to like we taught them about black composers and about Arabic music and things that like they wouldn't learn about necessarily in school.
Mm.
We gave them choice about what they wanted to learn to play for our performance, and I sort of on the spot like had them play an arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing, since we had like keyboard and singers and instrumentalists, which is like a lot of them didn't know that song before. And parents talked about how they came home was like, "Mom, we're learning this song called Lift Every Voice and it's cool." And so
And
yeah, it was a really, really great experience to be able to expose them to all of these different things and to teach them in a way that was a little bit unorthodox.
and who were these kids? I mean, did you target specific communities when it came to trying to get kids into the Arts in Action summer program?
Those students were all, yeah, they were pretty much all students that I knew personally,
Mm.
like some kids from church. I had one student come from the private school that I had taught at. Um, there was one student that came that her mom was friends with my friend and saw that like I had shared the post or they had shared the post and inquired. But yeah, for the most part, it was like people in my circle.
So what
like
has
one.
so what was your sort of technique as far as trying to grow this outside of just your personal network?
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at right now. Because in thinking about like kind of back to school and preparation, when I think they talk about like all these things that you can do with a music degree. One of them is run a camp, but like we don't have conversations about how to market and how to get people to come to the camp, and or even if you're going to teach lessons, how you expand that network. And so that's something that I'm learning right now, because last year we didn't have the program for sort of the reason that you talked about, in addition to the M word that has been tossed around several times, money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm learning now how to expand the network and how to get people to know about the program, but also come and participate in the program.
Are there people that you're able to reach out to? I mean, because I'm certainly not a marketing expert. I mean, what are you doing about the gap between your music education and the things that it takes to pull off arts in action every summer?
Yeah, I have a couple of friends that do like marketing and social media stuff, and so I'm constantly talking to them about like ways that I can provide visibility. But all of them say like really the best way to market yourself is to like face-to-face interaction. So like going to places and just being there. But also like I am a church musician, and so I've played at some churches that have like kids, and then I talk to the pastor and say, hey, I have this program, and then that's another way that I make some connections. But I think that like the social media stuff is good, the marketing is good, but it has to be sort of this united front of all of these different avenues so that you can really increase your visibility and get people to know what you're doing.
It sounds like this is something that needs to be taught in the music school.
Yeah. Um, and I don't know what that looks like. I know that like at my undergrad they had an arts like business class or something, arts management maybe it was. But it was one class and it was for performers. And as a music ed major at that time, I had all of these other classes, so I didn't have time to fit in another class. And also at that time, I wouldn't have even seen the value in that class because I'm going to be a teacher.
Right.
But I definitely think that conversations like that, even as a composer, I was thinking about, like, I had to talk to one of my friends. He asked, well, Amari, do you have a marketing plan for like your composing brand? And I was like, well, no, because if I had one, you would have come up with it. You
Right.
haven't told me anything. But yeah, as a composer, we didn't have classes about, these are ways that you can interact with people and get them to commission you or get them to play your music. And so yeah, it's something that is definitely missing from the college curriculum for sure.
And the headache is that there are avenues as far as getting support. We met at the Sphinx conference. So they definitely
Yeah.
do a lot of that work. Getting people's ideas off the ground. But it's so competitive these days that it seems like ideas like yours have to be more fully fleshed out to really get that institutional support. I mean, it must be so frustrating for you to have dealt with again, a gap in your education between, the art and the execution of programs, and your inability to really have access to the people that can get you that support based on again fleshing it out more fully. Is that something you've spent much time thinking about?
I mean, yeah, I've experienced it.
Yeah, you've lived
So
it.
yeah, when I was looking for grants and stuff, well, there are some organizations that they won't give you money until you've successfully run it on your own for 3 years. And I'm like,
Wow,
well, if I could run it on my own for 3 years, I wouldn't really need like
you were running on your own for
this
30
grant from
years.
you.
Yeah.
Right. So stuff like that. But even when other grants that I'm applying for, they want to know what my budget is. And I'm like, well, I haven't had a whole lot of goes at this, so I don't know like really what my budget is.
So because you weren't able to do it the Arts in Action Camp in the summer of 2019. You're going for it again this summer for 2020.
Yeah.
With all of these challenges in mind, people wanting to see fleshed out plans, budgets, and all that sort of thing. How are you approaching this summer differently to hopefully lead to a successful summer of the Arts in Action summer camp?
Yeah, I organized the board like maybe in the winter of 18. But I feel like now I've really been able to engage them in a way that will provide like different results for this summer camp. Um, and of course, like sort of learning on the fly last year, like the things that didn't work, the things that did work the previous year, and capitalizing on that. And so I do feel a lot more prepared. I um, started preparing earlier because that was another thing, sort of like waiting until the last minute.
Mm.
And so, like the promotion and stuff is all ready to go at this moment. Now it's just that the Rona might deter or cancel everything.
Right,
But
right. Again, as we're taping this, what about the money situation? Do you feel like you have the dollars and cents together?
so that's another thing that in my last board meeting I said, I'm lately really passionate about access, and I realized that I'm providing this program in an area where there's levels of high or a lot of people are experiencing like low SES. They don't have a lot of money. And so I'm providing this program that's really cool and I'm offering it at a discount of $200. But if you don't have $200 is a lot of money.
Right, absolutely. And
And
especially as we move
so,
forward with this health crisis,
yeah,
the people's pocketbooks are going to be getting tighter and tighter.
right. And so I'm really going to spend a lot more time raising money. I have like a benefit concert that I've planned, and also sort of a marketing plan to reach out to different organizations and churches to partner with schools so that they can sponsor kids from like specific schools in their neighborhood or in their local area. And applying for some of the grants that I do qualify for. But yeah, that's going to be a major focus this year to make sure that money isn't one of the reasons why people can't come to the camp.
I want to loop back around to, you're saying that you feel like, when you move from this Title I school back to, a more affluent school, a more privileged, district, circling back around to that, how does that play a role in the Arts in Action summer camp? I mean, are you specifically looking for kids, from those, at-risk communities to really participate in your program?
Yeah, that's like something that I've been going back and forth with. Like in reality, I just want kids to learn
Mm,
about the arts. But I know like in this specific area, that they don't get all of the exposure where like my kids, they can take art, they can take drama, choir, band, orchestra, archery, and like a whole bunch of other stuff. But I know like in the community where I am targeting, they don't have all of those options.
mm.
And so I'm not gonna turn kids away to say, oh, like you come from this privileged area, you can't come. But I'm definitely targeting a population that doesn't have the access to all of the opportunities that others do.
So, what do you say to the parent who may or may not know your story of, going through the music program and not really, having an idea of how it could turn into a profession? How do you tell those parents or those potential sponsors, look, this camp can serve them far beyond just learning the music skills?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier that you learn skills being a musician or participating in the arts that are transferable. You learn discipline because when you have to learn this music for this test or for the concert, like that's something you have to do on your own. You learn self-regulation and self-control. You learn how to be a leader. You learn how to do group work. You learn yeah, just so many skills that transfer outside of being a musician.
That sounds like a pretty good pitch to me. If
Yeah.
there's someone listening right now, either in Oklahoma or elsewhere, who wants to offer their financial support, how can they do that?
You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook account. It's Arts in Action Inc. Or you can go to my website. It's simdesign.com. It's SYMDESIGN.com. And there's a little tab for Arts in Action, and you can donate there and see pictures and stuff that we did on the Facebook account as well.
And I know we didn't really talk much about your performing or your role as a composer, but is there anything on your writing desk that you want to plug? And anything coming up in that regard for you?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna be writing I'm working on an orchestral piece right now that kind of deals with freedom and the idea of whether or not we're free. So using "Oh Freedom," the spiritual, as like thematic material. And then I don't know if I think we maybe talked about this at Sphinx, the centennial commemoration of the bombing of Black Wall Street is happening next
Oh,
month,
right,
or
yeah,
sorry, next year.
yeah, yeah.
So this weekend I was actually participating in this recording session where there may be 50, 60 artists and about 12 producers there going to make a hip hop album about Black Wall Street that will be released next year. But so I played violin on a lot of those tracks, and then also thinking about things that I can do to celebrate or commemorate Black Wall Street as well. So
Yeah, and we definitely need way more attention put on that bit of history because it's only, been recently since, it's been a broad bit of understanding of American history, much less,
yeah.
even within certain communities. Wow. You're mentioning the piece of music based on the freedom spiritual, really brings me to my last question. A lot of folks these days, again, with this health scare, are not feeling free. Kids are at home. Parents are trying to find ways to make sure their kids are taken care of while they're at home. Maybe they go to work, even if they stay at home, engage in a house full of kids and making sure that, their minds are being stimulated must be such a challenge for so many people. For any parents who have kids at home, that they need to keep busy throughout the day. How would you suggest that they do that musically? How can a parent impact their child's perspective on music, their music education during times like these?
Yeah, I think that that's going to be really important. There are videos on YouTube that you can find. I think also, like if you have a younger child, call and response is always a good thing and something that doesn't take a lot of experience. You just do something and then have the kid repeat after you. You can stomp, you can clap, or do combinations of things that make sounds. And then also let the student, lead, and then you call back to them and repeat the things that they do. You could make an instrument. There are different videos and things, tutorials that can walk you through the steps to make like a drum using maybe a cup and like paper and a rubber band, or something like plastic wrap and a rubber band around it. Um, Listening to music is always good. Having conversations about what the music makes them feel, or what maybe they like ascribing an emotion that they feel goes along with the different types of music that you play. And then there are several orchestras that have like sites for kids. I know the Dallas Symphony has a pretty good website that's interactive that kids can listen to stuff and create things. And And there are a couple other orchestras that have similar things that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Sure, sure. Yeah, the pathway in music education may seem really rigid, but the way you can apply that in your home is sounds very diverse. So many different
Yeah.
things that parents can do to engage their kids. Amari, I really appreciate your sitting with me in the description of this opus of Trilloquy. I'll be sure to make sure there's a link to your website there. I hope everyone listening will pay them a visit and also throw Amari a few dollars to help Arts in Action become a thing
Yeah.
for the summer of 2020. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
Thanks for having me, Garrett. I really appreciate it.
And next time you see your mom Irma, tell her the folks up here at American Public Media say hey.
I will.
Really great to talk to Mr. Amari Ford, named after his mother Irma. I thought that's pretty clever. What did you think about that?
That sort of
It's touching.
made me smile. It was sweet.
Yeah, it is sweet. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this opus, that music camp, due to COVID-19 has been, I'll say, postponed until next summer. So I really encourage you to take a look at his website. You can find it in the description of this opus and make a contribution if you can.
Now,
All right, Scott. So take it away.
we got some big news. Big news. I don't know. How do you want to bust it out?
Well, so this is the thing. So with COVID-19, many organizations have had to shift things around and figure out, what has to stay and what sacrifices have to be made. And American Public Media has chosen to hand Trilloquy over to Scott and myself as a completely independent project. And I don't know, Scott. I'm excited by that.
There's all sorts of mixed emotions, but I have to look down the line and just go, the trade-off is going to be more creativity, I think, with fewer guardrails that we had to follow. I think that we're going to be able to bring more and better content that I think that people will be interested in. That's what I'm looking forward to.
And we'll go into this a little bit more in the first episode of season 2 of Trilloquy, but I want to lay it out here that it's not about American Public Media deciding that, they just don't want to carry us anymore. It's not that Trilloquy was canceled as much as it's American Public Media doing what it could to make sure that this project could continue. There are all sorts of legal things behind the scenes, the logo, the fact that Trilloquy is a copyrighted brand,
Right, trademark.
by the United States, and all of that has been offered to us by American Public Media at a very equitable price. So I really want to shout them out. Shout out our general manager Brian Newhouse for really leading the way and helping Trilloquy become an independent project moving forward. Again, I'm excited right now that there's some bright things coming.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for some video. We're going to be doing more video projects for you to augment the audio that you get through podcasts. I think that the diversification of guests is going to just explode. And also, we're dropping the whole stories from the fringes of classical music.
Yeah, it's going to be even bigger than that. So as we, transition onto our own platforms, rebuild our website, it's going to take a little bit of time. So Scott and I are going to take a couple weeks off from bringing you opuses of Trilloquy. We will come back with a very special guest co-host. I won't just say a guest, but a guest co-host for the first for episode 1 of season 2 of Trilloquy. I just want to personally thank every single person who has stuck with us, through these, what I guess, 50 opuses of Trilloquy.
Yeah,
You know,
50 weeks.
Yeah, as I think back to some of our guests, and in an effort not to leave anyone out, I won't name any particular names except for one, Marion Dooley, who helped us get this whole thing going. His experience in the concert hall, seeing me there, wanting to make that connection, it gave birth to so many more conversations that have had an impact on institutions across the Twin Cities, across the country, and even around the world through some of the connections we've made. So I just want to send a special shout out to Marion Dooley, a special shout out to everyone who is a guest on Trilloquy, everyone who's been an engineer on this. Special shout out to James Napoli for being our go-to guy on the
Seiji
digital side.
Cataldo.
Seiji for getting us started, back in those early days. Shout out to him. And Scott, just a huge thanks to you. This is a journey that I've been on for many years now, and for you to join me in this iteration of it and to continue to be a partner as Trilloquy moves forward, it really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man, you're gonna make me cry. No, I'm glad to. And this is it's good work. It's work that I believe in. I'm learning stuff all the time, as you can attest to, and you've been gracious with patience. So that would be my suggestion to everybody who's listened so far. Try to find your Garrett.
Yeah, we used to describe ourselves as maybe Batman and Alfred, not much Batman and Robin, but I think we're hitting closer these days to the Robin Hood and Little John. Robbing the proverbial rich and giving it to the proverbial poor. I'm ready to be a even more badass bandit of classical music. So and the arts in general. Um,
Oodalali.
yeah. So again, thank you to everyone who stuck with us. We're going to take a couple week break, and we will return with you for the first opus of season 2 of Trilloquy. So until then, happy listening to music, and keep fighting the good fight out there.
Bye.